the Relentless CEO Podcast. With Adam Kifer. Follow your path to success alongside icons and industry leaders in martial arts, fitness, and more. Let's go. This is the Relentless CEO Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Relentless CEO Podcast. My name is Adam Kifer, and I'm your host, and I'm excited because we have a very special guest coming on the show. Her name is Ann Kirk. Ann is a school owner in Pennsylvania. One of the things that really stood out to me about Ann, besides being a Relentless CEO Mastermind member, is she does women's self-defense in a different way. And if you know anything about me, you know that while the entire industry is going this way, I like to go this way instead. And Ann is no different. Her and I have talked extensively about how self-defense is being taught incorrectly in the martial arts industry, specifically when it comes to teaching women self-defense. And I know that a lot of you teach women self-defense seminars, and Ann is going to give you guys some new insights on how to do it better and how to do it the right way. So I'm really excited for you guys to jump into this episode, get something out to take notes, because you're going to completely transform your women's self-defense experience. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you love. Let us know what you hate, and comment with any questions, because we can always address those in future podcast episodes. All right. And super excited to have you on the podcast today. You just gave a presentation as part of our Insane Idea contest, and I thought it tied in beautifully with some of the stuff I want to talk about today on women's self-defense. I know you reached out to me a while ago because you saw someone present on women's self-defense, and you're like, I just had to tell you, that was bullshit, which I thought was spot on. But for the people that maybe haven't heard of you or don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about your background, what you do, and then we're going to jump into some of the issues we see with the way self-defense is being taught in our industry.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk to you and reach a different crowd. So I kind of grew up in the Krav Maga world. That's my martial art, and it's my combative background. So I'm not a traditional martial artist. Before I was a Kravist, I was a dancer and a physical therapist. So movement has always been part of my story. And the movement went from something very pretty to something a little bit more violent, which is fun.
Still pretty though.
Through Krav, I've been able to teach some women's self-defense. And when I started teaching women's self-defense, I was a little upset about it because it was basically just Krav. And I was like, well, wait, women are a different demographic. So I'm lucky that I was able to get some research. I was able to work for the Domestic Violence Center. I've been teaching women for 5 years now and gathering their stories. So everything I've learned has helped to change the way I teach the women self-defense, from the way I market it to the way I design my classes. So, yeah.
So let's talk about, so this is what I've seen from women's self-defense in our industry, and then you can correct me if you've seen something different. It's usually a lot of like individual self-defense techniques taught at a seminar, with not a whole lot of preface of like situational awareness or really any type of those things. And in my perspective, it's almost sort of taught as like a generic self-defense class. And oftentimes with self-defense, that wouldn't even work for a bigger attacker attacking a smaller person.
Right. Yeah. It's always fun to attend women's self-defense seminars that are 3 hours long, and they go through 10 different techniques, and they talk about how important situational awareness is, but none of the techniques really talk about the situational awareness part. And they fire hose these students with a 100%. Year's worth of curriculum in an hour, and they're like, "Are you ready to sign up?" And they're like, "Wait, I have no idea what just happened to me now." So it's usually the marketing is usually truthful in that they want to talk about how important situational awareness is, and and they want to empower the women. But I just don't know if anyone ever asked the women that they were training what exactly would empower them.
I think it's almost the same thing that I feel like is wrong with just general instruction in our industry, where it's more about getting them to feel a certain way at the end than actually giving them something useful and real and applicable. And I think it goes back to, we want to build up confidence, so we just reward people, or we want the women to be able to break a board at the end so they can leave feeling good about themselves. And I think we see that on both avenues of even kids, and then now with women's self-defense stuff. And it goes back to what Jody talks about of symbols over substance. So talk to me a little bit about what you've sort of learned as you've been going through this journey of really focusing on teaching self-defense to women the right way, and sort of how that differs from what we just talked about.
Sure. It's funny you talk about the feeling. I'm a bit of an extremist at heart. And when I did a deep dive into the statistics and what really happens when women have to defend themselves, I got really heavy. And I'll tell you, that doesn't help anybody either. So we have to find a happy medium between you're amazing, you're empowered, you're confident, and 1 in 4 women will be the victims of intimate partner violence. So there's a way to deliver that message in bite-sized pieces. And that's what I've been working on recently. So I believe that Krav Maga is the best way to learn how to defend yourself. Now, not every person believes that. And does that mean I can't reach that audience? No, I don't think it does. So for me, what I've found to be a better way to present women's self-defense is to send information via email, via video, via text message, bite-sized portions of what it is a woman's going to need to understand how to keep herself safe. Then it's up to the woman to digest that. So if I'm tossing a ball at you and you don't have your hands up, I'm just going to throw a ball into your face. Nobody's going to feel good about that. So if I toss the ball and the woman doesn't have her hands up, then it's no good. So now it's like, okay, here's the ball. I'm going to throw it to you, but you let me know when you're ready. Once you're ready, here you go. I'll float it in. But we still want to be able to show women how to move and how to be strong and how to, for me, I want to teach people that, moving their body through fighting is fun. So come in, and now how can we make that happen where it's not threatening? And you have to find a balance, because you don't want to take away what you're trying to teach. So for example, when in a lot of Krav Maga schools, when we teach our women's self-defense, we talk choke from the front. So if you're someone who has never had another person put their hands around your neck, and if you are someone who's had someone put their hands around your neck, that's jarring. It's a little scary. So a lot of instructors will then say, okay, well, I won't go here. I'll put my hands on your shoulders. That's not a threat. I would not defend someone putting their hands on my shoulders the way that I would defend someone putting their hands around my throat.
I see that all the time.
Instead of watering down the technique, how can we teach that fast movement, the fast reaction? That's at least in Krav Maga, that's one of the primary principles is you need to address that threat automatically, reflexively, without thinking. So it's funny, I use the throw the ball at you example, because I have 6-pound medicine balls they're big. They look big, but they're not heavy. And we do chest passes. And as we're chest passing the ball, the women are starting to understand how to generate power forward. So my cross is being translated through a chest pass. The harder you throw that ball, the more velocity you're accepting when you catch it. So instead of holding a pad on my chest and having someone punch it over and over again, I'm accepting the impact of this ball, and it's not as scary. So I'm teaching women how to accept impact, helps us figure out where our feet need to be. So I'm automatically teaching them a fighting stance without calling it a fighting stance. And I'm teaching how to generate power throwing a ball, which is the same as throwing a punch. But it's fun and everybody has competition involved. Oh, who can throw it? Who can catch it? How far can you be? And you can engage more people in what you're trying to offer them when they're having a good time. And it's not like, oh my God, someone's trying to punch me. It's like, oh, someone's throwing a ball. Okay, catch, return.
Yeah, it would almost be like the equivalent of like someone that's never done martial arts and you just put them to a sparring class like the first time and you just expect them to be able to know how to react and respond. And you mean you can't do that at an hour seminar, Anne?
Yeah, right. And I joke with my students all the time because in Krav, you're really close. We don't defend ourselves from a long range. If we have long range, then we're going to hopefully disengage and find an exit. So we are like body to body with people on the first day. And I'm like, I feel like I should have bought you dinner first because you can see the people like, wow, you're really close to me. And it's like, yeah, so you have to lighten the moods that way. So that's that feeling of learning through play is what we do a lot with our kids. And I think as we've become a larger kids school, I've been able to translate that through into teaching adults because we like to play as well. So
now you also, in your self-defense communication and messaging for women, you also touch on some things that I think most martial arts school owners don't even know to touch on or are afraid to even talk about it. I was fortunate last year, I got to do some work with the Malou Foundation, which they do, it's a charity to prevent sex trafficking and help rehabilitate women that have been through the trafficking. And one of the craziest stats was they were saying that most people trafficked are trafficked by their own family. Or like one of the women that was there speaking was trafficked by her husband, which is insane to me. But I know you referenced the domestic abuse stat earlier. I think that there's also a big misconception when I see these women's self-defense classes that it's always like, yeah, you're running on the prairie path and some guy comes out of the bushes and attacks you. And it's like, well, you can tell when they're talking about that, they did no research on what women are actually experiencing and how often that situation happens compared to domestic violence against someone that they know. So talk to us a little bit about how you are sort of tackling that messaging. And I don't know if you figured out a way to bring it up where it doesn't like just come off as jarring and uncomfortable right out of the gate, or if you're easing into it, but I'd love to learn more about how you're doing that.
So yeah, it's a balance. It's a balancing act. You have to be able to read your audience. But there's a quote that says like, it's not by the time the number of people affected is this big, it's no longer real. It's just a statistic. So it's not reported as often in the news about, women being the victims of intimate partner violence. It's more, like you said, this woman was jogging and this guy came up and attacked her and she was able to fight him off. Or the Uber, if someone got into an Uber and the Uber tried to take them in the wrong direction, they were able to get away safely. And then there's these news stories, and then you talk about it. And you all of a sudden all these blogs come out or podcasts, and everyone talks about this boogeyman who's going to jump out and get you. And statistically speaking, that's not going to be what happens. It's like when they teach kids stranger danger, like the white van's going to pull up and grab you. And it's like, no, statistically speaking, the amount of violence that children receive and the abductions and all the scary things that happen are not from strangers. They're from family members. So it's the same thing with women. So I'd like to kind of explain and tell a story about how if I went out to dinner with you, you wouldn't punch me in the face on the first date, because that's not how predatory violence happens. So men have more of a social violence. They're the ones in the bar that are gonna be like, come on, bro, let's go. For women, it's more, it's a process. So the perpetrator will take more time to invest in the woman, because it's not just for one day. It's, I'm not going to rob you and take your money. I'm going to befriend you, and then I'm going to live with you. and you're going to support me. So I don't need the money that's in your wallet. I need the money that's in your bank account, and you're going to support me forever. So the violence that happens starts from a mental standpoint and an emotional standpoint. What I tell my teenage college age women is, you go on a date with this guy and you think he's great, and you have a great time, and he's moving forward in life, and he wants to bring you forward with him. And then you invite him out to hang out with your friends. And after you guys all hang out, he says to you, "Oh yeah, your friends are really nice, but they're kind of like immature. Like the jokes were a little bit like kiddish. Like, have you known these people for a long time?" And you might say, "Oh yeah, they're friends from childhood." And he's like, "Yeah, I can tell. Like, not that there's anything bad with it, but like you're moving forward, and you're 1% better every day, and you're crushing your goals. And your friends, they just seem like they're a little bit, in your past, and you're writing a new chapter." And you're like, "Oh yeah, no, I am writing a new chapter. I'm moving on, and I'm learning new skills." Okay, so you just don't hang out with those friends as much anymore. And then you're hanging out with this guy, and he's great, and you're moving forward in life. And then you like him enough to bring him home to meet mom and dad. And you bring him home to meet mom and dad. And, maybe your mom gets on you for something. And for the college kids, I'll be like, "Oh, maybe your mom's like, oh, what's going on with your classes? Have you figured out this internship yet?" And maybe you haven't. And you're like, "Oh, Mom, I haven't done it yet. I have a lot going on." And he pulls you aside, and he's like, "Listen, Ann, your mom just doesn't get it. You're an entrepreneur. You're moving. She doesn't think the way you do. You think in a new way. And she's not going to be able to understand what you're doing right now." And
trying to separate you from your support system.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then you're like, "Well, fine, I'm not going to talk to my mom about anything." So now he's separated you from your friends, and he's separated you from your mom. And now it's just you and him, and he has a bad day, and he comes home and he throws something against the wall. And you're like, "Whoa, that was so out of the ordinary." And he's like, "I'm just so stressed, and this house is just a mess." And you're like, "Oh, okay. And then you go out with new friends, and he's like, "You didn't tell me you were going out with your friends. Why didn't you answer your texts?" And you're like, "Oh, well, I didn't think I had to. I was just out, and one thing led to another. Come on in. You got to keep your eyes on the prize. You got to keep moving forward. We have goals." And he does this kind of like forced teaming where your goals are his goals, and you need to move forward this way. And then something else happens, and it's, gets him in a bad mood, and you maybe say something, you have your own opinion, and that's when he hits you. And you're like, "Wait, what just happened?" And you don't tell your friends because you haven't been talking to your friends for a while, and you don't tell your mom because you kind of cut her out of the loop too. And then you're like, "Well, maybe it was my fault that I don't have anyone to talk to anymore. I left them. I can't go and get any help from them. So I can fix this. I'm strong enough to fix this." And you work with him, and you talk about it. And then there's this honeymoon cycle that happens within the relationship where he's like, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it." And it's good again. It's really good again. And then something sets him off again, and boom, he hits you harder this time. And it's just, it's psychological warfare. And you don't have a support system because he's manipulated you away from it. And because it's not that aggressive, like, "You're not allowed to talk to your friends," you think it's your fault. And that's a really tough situation to get out of. I've heard it likened to if you're trying to quit smoking, how many times do you try to quit smoking? Same thing for women. Leaving a domestic violence relationship, it takes 5 to 7 tries, I think the stats are, before they can actually leave.
It's crazy that story you just described is very similar to the one that we heard at this Maloof charity event from a woman that was trafficked, where she's just like, all my friends were gone. I didn't have anyone else to rely on. I had no money. And so she's like, if I was to leave, I had absolutely nothing. And she had a young baby at the time also. So she's like, it's me and my baby. with nothing, no support system. She's like, what was I supposed to do? Type of thing. And it's hard when you're not in that situation to like put your mindset into people that are in that situation, which I think is part of the reason why a lot of us martial arts instructors start in the wrong place when it comes to women's self-defense, because we're not doing the research enough or having enough empathy to put ourselves in the shoes of the people going through it and figuring out, well, guess what? One seminar is not going to help that woman to get out of that situation when she's going through years of abuse or years of the same thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, when you broke down your women's self-defense, it was almost like a course, right? Like over, was it 6 weeks that they're doing it? And I also think too, that's going to help the women that come in and maybe are in those situations, don't want to say anything, to gradually build up their confidence, not only to be able to say something, but also maybe to build up that confidence with you as the instructor to be like, hey, this is going on. I need help, but I don't know what to do. And at least start that conversation. So now that we have a little backstory on the sort of the life of someone going through that type of situation, the way that you've structured your course, how are you educating women? What are some of the things that you're talking about in the emails and the messaging that you're sending out that's going to sort of maybe help spark some thoughts of like, oh, maybe I am in this, or this is what I know how to do to avoid these type of situations or spot red flags?
So for the most part, I do focus more on the red flag side of things. I'm a preventative medicine person by nature, so it's the physical therapist in me. What I do is I talk about being able to be confident in advocating for yourself. So like using your words. I talk about being able to have a mindset that you're going home and you don't have to, I know a lot of people talk about this, you don't have to be polite, but I try to give more examples. So, I'll send that email about, having confidence and advocating for yourself and, not being polite and asking for forgiveness instead of asking for permission. And then when they come in, that's when we'll do the striking after that email. And I'll have them hold the pads, and I make the women hold the pads against their bodies. So when their partner is striking, if their partner is striking them too hard, they have to advocate for themselves and say, can you go a little bit lighter?
That's so smart.
Yeah, that's hard for people to do because they're like, oh, they're here to train too, and I don't want to take anything away from their training. And they'd rather do this with the pad than to actually say, you're awesome and you're really strong, but I can't take that much power yet. Can we go a little slower, a little bit lighter? So I'll send the email, hopefully let the seed germinate. And then when they come in, then we'll talk about them. I'll say it, they'll do it. And I'm like, see, you can't advocate and hear for yourself in this structured situation against your friend, or maybe, mom brought a daughter. How are you going to walk outside and have to advocate for yourself against a stranger or someone who's trying to hurt you? So a concrete example usually helps to give that feedback back and forth. Like, this is what I mean. It's not just be polite, because I think women have gotten to a point now where we're more comfortable with not being polite. So I have generations of women who come in, and like, I know for me, my mom sees what I do and she's like, I would have never said anything like that. And now I have my daughter who's 14 and she's already heads and tails past me. So we have to make sure that our messaging isn't still pigeonholing women into this like petite, polite little sweet thing, because it doesn't matter. Like, there's MMA fighters who've been in domestic violence situations.
Yep.
They don't have to be a certain type of person. And I also make sure that the women are understanding that a survival mindset is something that needs to be trained. You can't just wake up and be like, oh, I'm going to defend myself. I'm going to look around and make sure everything's okay. And I'm going to identify problems and separate myself from them. Or if someone attacks me, this is what I'm going to do. You have to almost play it like a movie inside of your brain. So if I know that when I leave work, there's a dark alley that I can walk down quickly to get to my car, or there's a lighted path around the side, I need to make sure that I use that lighted path. And there are going to be days where I'm going to forget and I'm going to want to go down that alley. So let me, what would happen if someone were in that alley? When would I say I need to turn around and leave? When would I say, I'm going to walk past them? What are the boundaries? So the women have to set their boundaries and understand that they're not rules. So if I say, Adam, if you come within 3 feet of me, I'm leaving. And you come within 2 feet of me, you're not necessarily doing anything you think is wrong because you live by your rules. But if I don't leave now, then I'm going against my boundaries. Yep. So I need to make sure I can disengage. So it's really about, it always comes down to confidence in your actions, confidence in your decision making. I know when we were at the summit the Mastermind in Orlando, and Jonathan started talking about the OODA loop, and he's like, "Do you guys know what the OODA loop is?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And there people are like, "What's OODA loop?" And I'm like, "Wait, what?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I live in an echo chamber." Yep. Because everyone I know knows the OODA loop, and people talk about the OODA loop all the time.
Now, and for everyone that's listening, that's like, what the fuck is a OODA loop? Go ahead.
So the OODA loop is an acronym for observe, orient, decide, and act. And it was an Air Force colonel who kind of like coined the phrase and set the system in place. And it works really well for everything, not just on the military side of things. And as women, I think we're very good at observation. We look around all the time. I think that we are able to orient very well too, because it's from a society standpoint, we're all working on being much more present in our, daily life. Take it in, look around, name 3 things you see. The decide part, I think, is actually an easy thing as well. Probably the second hardest, but still
unless it's like figuring out where to go to dinner and it's my wife.
Well, we all decide what we want. It's what we're actually acting on. That's the part. So if I need to decide whether or not I go on the left side of the street or the right side of the street, I can look and I'd be like, all right, that left side's really dicey. This right side's not. I need to take that left side.
Yep.
It's the action that's hard. Because if I decide in my head and I know that that's the wrong place to go and I still go that way, it's because I'm concerned about what other people think about me, or I'm concerned that I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings, or I'm concerned that people are going to think that I'm judging. So that's the tough part, the action. So that's where go ahead.
So I am 100% in agreement that I feel like women are so observant. And I feel like they're also better at reading people than men for the most part. Because I can't tell you how many times my wife has been like, I don't like that person. I'm like, oh, no, they're fine. Don't worry about it. And then like a year later, she's like, I told you so. I was like, I know I should have listened to you. But I think that's amazing that women have that ability to be able to read people. But I think women also tend to care more about what other people think as well. And that's a battle going on inside their head constantly, because I'm obviously speaking from the dude perspective, but like for me, if someone's like, if I'm worried someone's not gonna like my behaviors, then I'm just limiting myself, and like I'd rather not give a fuck about the person's opinion and just do what I feel like is right. But I also probably don't have as much empathy as like my wife does, where she's probably like, well, what about that person? How are they gonna feel, type of thing. So how do you get women to win that battle in their head?
I'm honest with them, because they'll look at me and they'll be like, oh, she's so confident. She doesn't care what anybody thinks. And it's the exact opposite. I have to purposefully every day. So I write myself a power list of 5 things that I need to do every day, no matter what. And it changes based on the season that I'm in. But one thing that's always on there is do something that scares you, because I'm afraid. I'm afraid all the time. I'm afraid that what I have to say doesn't matter. And I'm afraid that I'm not going to give the best advice, or I'm afraid that someone's going to look at me and be like, she can't fight. She shouldn't be teaching Krav Maga. So for me, what I tell the women, I feel like vulnerability is one of the best ways to connect and be like, listen, I'm in the same shoes you are. I'm still afraid that I'm going to, make the wrong decision, or offend someone, or be judged. And you have to actively work on that. You have to actively take the decision and make it. So we work on, and that's another thing that's so awesome about self-defense when we actually get to teach the Krav, is that it's black and white. Someone puts their hands around your throat, you defend. There's multiple defenses, but you're not like, should I use my voice? If I do this, are they going to think I'm a bitch? It's like, no, like you have
hands on me, hands on them.
Yep. Time to go, time to fight. And that's what I say to them. That's why I train. That's why my way to be better and to protect my family is through training, because I suck at the gray. So I had to find something that was black and white, and Krav Maga is black and white. I defend myself. It's done. So, but I don't want it to always come to that, but that's just my training module. So that's, and then again, it always comes back to tie into, making those decisions every day that scare you, and reminding yourself that, you are okay to apologize later should you do it wrong. I have a friend of mine who says, I'm not judging that person, I'm reading that person. And I think that was a great quote that she says, but it's still a little advanced for a lot of people to understand the difference between judgment and reading. So for me, I always say, if you make the wrong decision, say you're sorry. But if you make the right decision, you've just saved your life. And you have that, it's not like you're just making it willy-nilly. You have this gut intuition. And Rory Miller says in The Gift of Fear, sorry, not Rory Miller, Gavin DeBecker says in The Gift of Fear that your intuition is always in response to something, and it always has your best interest at heart. So you have your internal alarm system going off because something is not right with you. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt, step up, and then you can always go back and say you're sorry. Which I
love that.
Yeah, it's giving people the ability to, you're giving them license to be wrong, and it's okay then. You don't always have to be right. You don't always have to be perfect. God, there's this great TED talk about teaching our girls that they don't have to be perfect. They just have to be brave. So the amount of resources that I send people about this one particular part of women's self-defense is like all over the place. I haven't found one answer. And that's another important thing to remember in self-defense, that there isn't just one way to do it. There's a plethora of ways, and you have to be able to read your audience to figure out which one is going to fit in each scenario.
So piggybacking off that, what are some ways that you're reading the audience to figure out what's going to be the best for them?
So you want to look at the energy level. If I go, so I tend to pontificate a little bit on things that I get really passionate about. And if I see like that happening, I'm like, okay, bring it back. Let's start hitting. Or if I think the best way, I'll be honest with you, and it's nothing special that I do. I'm not some super, audience reader. You just have to let people ask you questions. So when I was a physical therapist, I had a mentor who said to me, she's like, you can read the chart and see what the patient's complaints are. But if you go I worked in the hospital. She said, if you go into their hospital room and you let them tell you the story, they'll tell you exactly what happened. So if you can just take a beat and let the women or the student, whoever it is, explain to you what they need, or tell a story of something that they've done, then that is the best way to figure out how to then put other pieces in. I have go-tos that I usually will always go to. There's a bunch of TED Talks that I talk about, but if I need to break the silence, so best case scenario, let them tell you what they need. Second case scenario, they want to tell you, but they're being really quiet and shy. I tell a story that's funny. So can I tell the story? I mean, are we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I tell them, I'm like, situational awareness is so important, and we need to read our baselines and keep our heads up and stay present. And I should be the best at this, right? Because this is what I do every day. I'm a situational awareness expert. All I do is teach Krav Maga. But let me tell you, I'm not. I was my husband and I were traveling, and we were at the airport, and it was in the middle of February, and we were traveling to Texas, and our first flight was canceled. We had to wait and maybe get another flight, and we were all the way back in the way back of Philadelphia airport. And I was concerned because with the snowstorm, I wasn't sure if my staff would know if they could close the school or keep the school open. So I'm juggling all these things, and I'm worried about the flight, and I'm worried about our event in Texas, and I'm worried about the school. And I say to my husband, listen, I need to go to the bathroom. I'll be back. So I start walking into the bathroom. My phone rings. It's one of my staff. And should we close the school? And I'm like, I don't know, Greta, what do you think? What's it look like? Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. And then I see the bathroom, I'm like, all right, I gotta go. Let's just cancel classes and I'll talk to you later. So I hang up, I walk into the bathroom, and it's a small bathroom. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's the back of the airport. And there's 2 stalls, and they're occupied. And you've probably never been in a women's bathroom before, but I'm like, 2 stalls, that's weird. Both occupied. Well, that makes sense. So I start doing my hair in the mirror, making sure I look cute. And then I hear someone's radio go off, and I'm like, ooh, maybe I'll get the super secret intel that, that our flight was canceled, and I can go back and tell my husband, guess what I know, and be the super secret spy. Cause that Ernie and I always try to up each other on how we're such dorks. So, I'm like, yes. All right, I got the inside intel. I'm gonna one up them. And so I'm laughing to myself, and then the stall opens and a guy walks out, and I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, and then I turned around to leave, and another guy walks in, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in the men's room. And he's like, yeah, you are. And I'm petrified. I leave the bathroom, and I run out, and then I walk 2 feet down, and there's the women's bathroom. And I walk in, and there's 15,000 stalls, which is how bathroom could look. And I'm like, see, guys, I wasn't paying attention. I'm actually in there thinking I'm badass, getting all this inside intel, and I'm in the men's room. But did I just stay there and be like, oh, I screwed up, I might as well take it now? No, I screwed up. I wasn't right. So I changed my situation. I got out, and I went to where I needed to be. So you don't have to be perfect at knowing what's around you and being super alert all the time. You're never going to be able to do that. All you have to do is be able to see what's going on, take the information in, and keep deciding and acting. Once you freeze, once you stop, and you're just well, I guess this is what I get. Then that's when the fight's over. So
right. I think that theory should be taught more in general in martial arts, because I would say a majority of the martial arts schools that I've visited teach self-defense as you punch, I get out of the way, boom, boom, boom. Everything worked perfectly. Everyone's footwork was exactly what it was supposed to be. And it's never taught well, what if it doesn't work? Or what if I make a mistake and I step the wrong way? Or what if I do this? And no one embraces like the ugliness of self-defense of like, hey, this is not going to look like a choreographed fight scene. It's not going to look like it would with a compliant partner. This is going to get ugly. You might fall. They might fall. Something else might happen. The biggest thing is that survival mindset of keep fighting through, keep going, or, hey, I made a mistake. I'm not going to dwell on that mistake. I'm going to move on and see what's available for me to do. But I think even that example you just showed is like, hey, that translates directly to self-defense in the sense of you're going to fuck up. Like it's the best people in the world fuck up. And it's about pushing through and finding the right solution after that, which I'm sure you guys in Krav do that all the time. But what are some other things that you've noticed with our industry on the self-defense side that you feel like is just super lacking? I feel like we need Jody here for this too.
Things that piss me off.
Yes.
I think one of the things that really kind of irks me is when you see like the big guys with the neck tattoos who teach women self-defense, and they'll say, oh, this two-handed pluck for a choke, that's bullshit. It doesn't work. Look, she can't, when somebody does this to me, it's never going to work. And I'm like, yo, bro, who the hell's going to attack you with a two-handed choke? Like or with a choke from the front. Like that's not an attack you're going to be faced with. And regardless, let's talk about how the fuck did somebody get that close to you to choke you from the front? Why didn't you kick them first? Why didn't you move out of the way? Because it's not the choke that's really the threat. The threat is the person. And it's not the boogeyman in the dark alley who's going to come out and choke you from the front. It's your husband. It's your boyfriend. And when they choke you, guess what? Your kids are sitting across the room. So yeah, maybe this two-handed pluck defense or this one-handed pluck defense in Krav might not work, but it might not even be what you need to do in that situation. So I tell my students all the time, this technique will fail. I teach huge men. I mean, my husband and I are the primary teachers at our school, and he teaches, 3 days a week. I teach 3 days a week. So it's like the other night I was teaching headlock, and this guy put me in headlock, and I couldn't do the Krav Maga defense to get out of it because he was that much bigger than me. And I'm like, okay, guys, look. And I just pop my head out the back. And I'm like, that's not some super secret agent Krav Maga defense, right? You YouTube a headlock defense in Krav Maga. That's not what you're going to find, but it doesn't matter because that's how I got out of it. And that's what we need to teach our students is it doesn't matter how you do it. It just matters that you get away from it and that you get out of it. Now I'm going to teach you the techniques because the techniques are built from, especially in Krav, from functional movement patterns. So they're based in reflexes, and that reflex is what becomes very efficient. And then you make it very effective, and then you build on that. But it was designed for the Israeli military. And even when I teach my kids Krav Maga, I'm like, how many of you are in the military? And they all laugh. And I'm like, okay, how many of you are Israeli? And maybe once I've had somebody raise their hand. I'm like, so why would these techniques matter? How you're not going to do this. You're just going to get away. I need you to get away. I need you to understand the principles. So when teaching self-defense, I think we need to pay more attention to what the principle of it is and less attention to what the technique is. So, I also, it really does get interesting. I also think we need to stop holding ourselves to the standard of the YouTube video of the grandmaster being attacked by his student. Because that's not how it works. You've been chosen to be attacked because the person who came to the fight thought they were going to win. And if the person who came to the fight starts to lose, they're not just going to be like, oh, you win. No, they're going to change their tactics. They're going to come in with something new. It's the same thing I say. I had to teach once so I taught with my husband. So my husband's Ernie Kirk. I don't know how many of your people know him, but he's pretty well known in the Krav Maga world. Then one of his friends, BK, who was his Israeli Special Forces, And then there were like 3 jujitsu black belts that were also law enforcement. So, and then there was me, little old me, getting to teach. And it was a bunch of police officers. And I'm like, okay, what can I teach these people? How can I teach these people self-defense? And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to stick with what I know. And so when it was my turn to introduce myself, I said, all right, guys, out of all these people standing in front of you, which one do you think you're going to attack? And they all said me. And I'm like, okay, so maybe I understand a little bit more of what it feels like to be the targeted person. And maybe I have a better idea of what it feels like to have techniques fail because the person attacking me just has such a higher level of aggression or strength or mass. Maybe I might have a little bit more some more insight to give you. So that's what I would like to see more of in the self-defense world, is just the idea that you're not evenly matched.
Yes.
Even if you're the biggest guy in the room, and I tell the biggest guy in the room, I'm not going to attack you from the front. I'm going to attack you from behind with a bat. Like, this is not going to be fair. So defend that. Go ahead, defend bat from behind. Let me see you do it. So it's not a combat sport. We're not in a ring. We don't have any protective equipment. We're not evenly matched in weight. We're not evenly matched in skill. There's no ref. And there's no, 2 minutes and then you get a minute break.
Yeah, there's no rules.
No rules. So don't treat it as if it is.
Well, all I can say is, and that I've seen you hit pads and you'd not be my first choice to attack. So So yeah, I have to give you a shout out because Jody and I, we have an Instagram thread that's pretty entertaining and fun, but it's all us sending videos of martial arts schools classes back and forth to each other that are like really terrible. And it's so evident how many schools have either owners or instructors that don't train. And I have to say, you, the entire time I've known you, have always trained like crazy and led by example on that. And I wish more people listening to this podcast, more people in our industry would train the way they expect their students to train. So keep that shit up. I did want to talk to you a little bit since you're in our mastermind. And just, I know there's a lot of people that listen to this that will reach out to me, ask me questions about the mastermind, or aren't really sure like if the investment is worth it because they've been in other coaching programs before and they're just like, yeah, they promised all this stuff at the beginning and then we didn't get any of it or they didn't follow through. Can you just talk to everyone about your experience in the mastermind so far? And I want you to be honest and truthful, so I don't think you have to like just say only good things. But talk to everyone about sort of what your experience has been like in the mastermind. And I think you've been in some other coaching programs before too. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe just about like the difference that you've seen in the mastermind compared to what you've done before.
So for me, we've been clients for a little under a year now. And I can say that my biggest takeaway is being able to articulate and create systems to improve things that aren't working. So, like you said in the beginning of this podcast, like we talked one time about somebody presenting about women's self-defense, and I called bullshit on it. And I was super nervous because it was someone that we both admire and respect. But they just had a little bit of a different idea of women's self-defense. And I was like, I don't want to piss off Adam. I don't want to piss off this other gentleman, but it's not sitting with what the culture of the Relentless CEO is. So I requested a call with you and I got on it and I'm like, Adam, I don't want to bitch and I don't want to complain, but you told us to charge what we're worth. And an 8-week women's self-defense for $99 is just bullshit. And I said, I don't want to sound ungrateful for everything that everyone has to give us, but he's not telling the right thing. And I don't know what he's teaching, but the marketing's off. And you're like, no, that's good. I'm glad that you brought that to me. And no, we shouldn't be charging that. And you're right. You need to charge what you're worth. And we both kind of talked through ways to improve how we can talk about self-defense training. And it was from that conversation, that openness, that transparency, that I was able to take the steps to start to build the women's 6-week self-defense program that I trialed and then talked about in Orlando. And now I get to talk to you about it on the podcast. So I would say the biggest takeaway from this mastermind, and I would think I haven't been in too many other masterminds, but I've worked with other martial arts business people. I never felt like I was in a place to even have a conversation with the head guy about my thoughts. I never thought that it was never a give and take. It was just like, here, this is the way we do it. So being able to find the words to say what I think is wrong, and then not only say it, but be like, here's an SOP. Here's my answer to this problem. It might not be the whole answer, but it's a better answer than what's going on right now. And let's share it, and let's talk about it, and let's try it in different places, and we'll get data. I never looked at data before. I never understood data. And now I love data. I love my spreadsheets and my percentages and figuring out what my KPIs are.
Which is awesome, because I remember when that shit used to scare you.
And again, gray scares me. I don't know anything about accounting. Money has always been something that my family didn't really talk about. There was enough money in the bank that we could pay our bills, but we were always broke. We never had enough money, but bills were always paid. Like it was, my parents didn't understand money. And since I've joined your mastermind, I have a financial advisor. I have investments for myself and for my daughter. I've started to implement profit first. So I'm understanding how much I should be spending on expenses, and not like, oh, we signed up a bunch of people, I can invest in all this other stuff. I know that my accountant is not the best accountant for me, and I'm confident enough to make calls to other accountants to interview them. What? Little old me interviewing an accountant, but they know so much more. They're an authority. So it's put me in a position to I'm a student again. I'm a student of business. And I have such a thirst and a hunger for learning. And it's just, at first I was like, give it to me, everything. And now it's been a year and I'm like, okay, all right. And I've had enough of the buffet. Now I'm going to have a sit down meal, and I want on my plate a new accountant, profit first, and being able to have hard conversations and be confident about it. Boom. That's it. And it's, you provide the smorgasbord, you provide that all you can eat buffet. And then it's just really cool to get to the point to be like, all right, I've tried a little bit of everything. I know this is where I need to start first. So
I love that. And going back to what you said too, just about not having like the coaches being accessible, like with some of the past groups you worked with. It's funny. I'm in a few different masterminds right now, and I just quit one of them. And the exact reason I quit was, as I was talking to the guy who runs, I was like, hey, it's like, you guys just aren't accessible at all. Like, you'll go up on stage and we don't see you the rest of the weekend. There's no way to reach out to you in between. And I was like, the other mastermind I'm in, I can reach out to the head guy whenever I want, jump on a call. I can ask him questions at the event. He makes a point to go around and talk to every single person at the event. And that's what I believe it should be. If you're paying for coaching, like, there should be accessibility. That's part of that. And we had some new mastermind people in Orlando there that were there for their first mastermind that came from other coaching groups or whatever. And one of them came up at the cocktail party that we had. And like, I can't believe you're here. And I was like, why wouldn't I be here? It's like our cocktail party. She goes, do you think so-and-so from whatever coaching group she was with? She's like, do you think they would show up anywhere that wasn't on the stage to actually talk to the people that they coach? And I was like, man, the fact that that's something that sets us apart is a little sad, just because I feel like it should be a normality for most groups. But I do appreciate you guys recognizing that, because our coaches, we talk about it all the time in our coaching meetings of like, how can we be more accessible? How can we just interact with everyone in the group more? So I appreciate you sharing your experience with everyone. We are sort of starting to run out of time. So, Anne, any last things that you want to say to our audience to leave them with today when it comes to women's self-defense, running a school, being a female school owner, any of that stuff?
Wow.
No pressure.
I would just say, women are a difficult demographic. We are not small men, and we're not facing the same threats that men are. We also have many more responsibilities, maybe not more. That's unfair. We have different responsibilities. So just like if you were trying to provide a service to police officers, they work shift work. So they're not going to be able to hit the same classes every week. Women cannot commit the same way that maybe moms can't commit. I don't know. I don't have the data to separate each person out, but in the 5 years that I've been teaching women's self-defense, it's not that what you're doing is so wrong that you're doing a disservice. Some people, maybe it's unethical, but for the most part, I think people really want to help women. You just don't know where to meet them, and you can't fit them into a box that fits men or society in general. I had, for example, just a small group. I had 7 women sign up for a 6-week course. And within 2 weeks, I had 3 of them quit because one's husband had a different work schedule. So now her whole schedule had to change. And then it was a mother and daughter. The daughter got a new job. So the daughter had to switch schedules. And then the mom wasn't going to come without the daughter. So there's other societal factors involved with providing this service to women and the value to women. So instead of being like, oh, nobody shows up or nobody signs up, think of how can I think outside of the box to provide this to women in a different fashion? Like, can I shoot them a bunch of emails or have an online back and forth in like a Facebook group or a Discord channel, and then bring them in intermittently to do the physical training? Because like we said in the beginning, it's not necessarily the physical training that women need. They need the mental strength. They need the emotional strength. They need the support system. So let's focus on that. And just because it's outside of our, realm, like self-defense, for me, Krav Maga, punching, kicking, choking, bear hugging, right? But why don't we just say, let's take the problem solving from our discipline and the principles from our discipline and provide them to women in a way that's more multimedia, or, send them emails or a blog or a journal, and then bring them in intermittently for the physical part, because that's the fun part. We know that's the fun part. That's why we do it.
I love all of that. And thank you so much also for just taking the time to jump on and share. I know this might have been one of the things that was uncomfortable to do on your list, or maybe you're nervous to do, but I appreciate you doing it.
I'm going to do this better next time.
No, I think what you shared makes the industry better and makes us more aware of maybe some of our weaknesses in teaching in our school. Because I think even like a majority of the industry being very kids focused, I still see them throwing women's self-defense seminar, but like it's something that they got as like a packet from another business coach or something that also was not good at teaching it. Or it was like, maybe they did some research on YouTube or something and just tried to throw it together. So I'm hoping that this helped push a lot of people in the right direction. If anyone listening to this wants to reach out to you to like pick your brain or just ask you some questions, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
social media, I think, would just be the best way. Drop me a message. It's Ann Kirk. Can't get any easier than that. Or Krav and Coffee on Instagram.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ann.
Thank you, Adam.
We're unstoppable. To the top, we about to go. That CEO, I need to know the impact we about to grow. Competition comical. Straight A1, we on the road. Money focus for the goal. Tell them what they need to know. We unstoppable.